Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in the jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy Podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy Podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy Podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually, really, truly, and utterly actually focuses in on geopolitics, be it in the macro or the micro. You know, the things that really matter to you out there, the public, and how that connects with the secret world, to be fair. Today, continuing part 2 of our discussion, which is basically the state of the world, we've got the man around town, the band player. He used to be the man on the Clapham omnibus, but now we call him the man in a London black cab. It's the one and only Dan the Man. How you doing, Dan?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, Carlton. How are you?
Very good, thank you, my good friend. So we're back for part 2 of your assessment coming from the streets. Mm-hmm. So I think when I left last week, I think I said you wanted to talk on a couple of subjects. I think we were talking nuclear war because people were talking about that. I think we talked about medical, which I think you were going to orientate yourself towards COVID. I don't know. And then you said you wanted to do something on gender. So here we go. Let's rock and roll, baby.
Yeah. So you're right. Last week we did pick up on a couple of different subjects, and yeah, let's go into then nuclear. Obviously, I suppose you're talking about Putin, Ukraine. In fact, first of all, did you see the Tucker Carlson interview?
I did see the Tucker Carlson interview.
What did you think?
I thought Tucker Carlson went in there with a proposition of being an American interview. And I think he basically got his school satchel handed to him. So I think he had not a clue about Russian history, which if I was going in to speak to President Putin, an intelligence officer, who basically
been in power for a very long
absolutely
time.
Been in power for a long time, and as an intelligence officer who knows how to play people, I would suggest that you understand the background of the history of the land that he's come from. He had not a clue, and he was schooled. Mm-hmm. So, which wasn't negative because the rest of the world could understand where Russia was coming from, but he was schooled on it, and I think he was schooled that much. And I'll give you a subject that the interview, although poo-pooed by the mainstream media, took massive amounts of interest on the what we now call social media circuit. Everything.
Yeah, of course.
And it's had millions upon millions of people watching it. And I think that a lot of people took that message and thought, hey, you know what? This guy's telling us something. So it is an absolute and utter surprise to me 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, whenever it was, Navalny dies. Okay? A guy who basically only ever polled, I think when he went in to be the mayor of Moscow, I think he polled 27% of the vote, right? And I believe in his secondary party to be the president, if you look at polling, I'm talking about general polling, anybody who does it, his polling rate was like 5-10%, right? But of course, we made him out to be the greatest hero the world has ever seen. I have my suspicions from being an intelligence officer. I suggest that he was picked up and played by the West, because we have a thing called Achieving Scholars, which we'd bring people in to Britain who we thought, and this is run from the Empire days, people who we thought would be of interest to us in Empire, who we thought were going to do well in their own country, people who would think like we want to think, and we bring them over, Oxford, Cambridge, look after them, Achieving Scholars, and they get scholarships.
Yeah.
The Americans do exactly the same. Program run halfway by the CIA, and they take him to Stanford, etc., etc., etc. And he was there, right?
Okay.
So he's been one of these fellas that they've been done
pushing in, yeah.
And so therefore, I think that was his play. But what I'm trying to say with that is, no way, shape or means would any thinking person kill that guy after you've got the world talking about Tucker Carlson positively. And indeed, Tucker Carlson subsequently was invited to Dubai to speak about it. He was invited to to several other places around the world. He's been invited to speak about the interview.
Yeah.
So it's all running positive. And then what do? You then kill the one fellow who... No, come on, don't make any sense.
Exactly.
Now, of course, it might be that he just died of some problem. Or it could be that he was taken care of by somebody else of a different vested interest. That's all I would say to that. But for Putin to have that interest, it makes zero sense.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I'd say on that score. Sorry, your question, nuclear war, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was just, I mean, the first thing I noticed in that interview was just how cognitively different him and Joe Biden are. I mean, it's polar opposites, isn't it?
It's criminal,
I mean, he's very clued up, very intelligent, knows a lot about the history of the country. Joe Biden, like you say, can't string a sentence together. I mean, surely the American people can't feel very safe in his hands.
Well, you see, obviously, I would argue, I can't say obviously because I don't know because I'm not there, but, the connections that I see and hear from, who have been in the intelligence, have been in the CIA, have been in other intelligence agencies. These are people who are patriots for the United States, have been in the armed forces at senior levels. Some of them are just open fellas you'll see on the alternative medias, like your Colonel McGregor's or your Colonel Wilkerson's or your Ray Milan, is he called? Larry Johnson, CIA people. One of the guys, Ray, was the briefer to the President of the United States every morning for 4 years. So these aren't people who are anyway. This is a CIA briefer. So these are guys who know what they're talking about, right? And you'll hear these guys say, what has gone wrong in the US? What's happening?
Yeah.
What is happening with this war we're doing in the Ukraine? Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that, and Tucker Carlson came from that perspective, is that historically you need to understand, and frankly I believe many people don't even know that Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union. I actually clearly believe that many people are not even au fait with that basically it's like that the Ukraine used to be like Scotland to the United Kingdom, to Britain, to England, right? Another part thereof.
Yeah.
And obviously when the Soviet Union fell and it went into its 15 different Soviets read for that, counties or states, when it fell into its 15 different Soviets and each one of those leaders of a Soviet took over their own area, be that Kazakhstan, Belarus, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, etc. Yeah, when they took over their own, they had their own policies and their own purposes. Now, the reason why I mentioned this, there was a discussion between actually a very, very famous individual who worked on the behalf of the United States in Russia. And I say Russia, at the fall, well, first of all, in the Soviet Union to Yeltsin, he was giving information and aiding and helping them out from the United States. Then subsequently, when the Soviet Union fell and Gorbachev fell in the Soviet Union and Yeltsin came in, then he was giving information to and aiding and assisting Yeltsin to get his government going. He also aided and assisted the first leader of the Ukraine now independent, like the rest of the 15 Soviets were. So he also, President Khrushchev, he helped him as well get all these physical and fiscal policies going. So this guy, who is a well-known professor, and I've just forgot his name for a second because people who know the show know that sometimes my brain forgets the name of individuals. Professor Sachs. Professor Sachs.
Yeah.
Very, very well-known, top guy. He was sitting on the show just the other day with, what's the guy called who dislikes Meghan? Who used to go on
Piers Morgan.
Piers show. He was on Piers' show. And, and Professor Sachs tried to explain things, but I think he went over Piers' head, to be fair. And maybe Professor Sachs should have made it a little bit more understandable for the average person. But he tried to explain how, what President Yeltsin's, President Putin's perspective was and how that happened. And he says, I know this because I was in contact with all these leaders. With all the American leaders, with all the leaders what was in the Soviet Union, then subsequently in the states that used to be part of the Soviet Union, including Russia, and then also in the Middle East. I'm connected to them all because he's a well-known professor and speaks all over the world. So he was saying to, and what was quite interesting is what Piers said is this: maybe Ukraine shouldn't have given up its nuclear weapons. Well, it was the Soviet Union. So, who owned those nuclear weapons? If you're going to say each Soviet owned its part of the nuclear weapons, then what you're going to have is all of those ex-Soviet states with nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Georgia, Belarus, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. We can go on and on and on. All of them would have had nuclear weapons. Is that what you're advocating, Piers Morgan? Yeah? Or was it better for all the nuclear weapons from the Soviet Union to come into Russia's hands?
Yeah.
Right? Because what happened is under the agreements they made, of course, and this is why all that history is important, when the Soviet Union agreed that Germany could unite, when they agreed that, an agreement was also made that NATO could come into Germany because it was part of it. So when a united Germany came, East and West, it could be part of East and West Germany. But, and this was the quote, not 1 metre further.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's what's happened. So, yeah.
Since that time of not 1 metre further, they've come all the way to the Russian border. Right? And the last step was the 2,000-mile border with Ukraine. And NATO wanted to put itself into the 2,000-mile border with Ukraine. Now, let me spin this the other way around, because I always like to do this. And when I was in the game, when I was in the intelligence and national security game, I always said, what does the other guy think?
Yeah.
And I always spun it away to the other guy. We have a perplexing heart attack when a Russian ship floats around our coast, not even in English waters, in British waters.
Yep.
Outside our coast. We're screaming, oh, what's this Russian doing in our waters? But we're happy to put our weapons on its border. Yeah. In what used to be Soviets.
It's hypocritical. Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally and utterly. Would the United States accept nuclear weapons on the border of Mexico? In the Caribbean, in any Caribbean island, definitely not in Cuba. No. Would it allow for that to happen in Canada? No, it wouldn't. The Monroe Doctrine I spoke about last week, they would turn around and say, this is what we need to go to war on.
Yeah.
Right? But somehow Russia's meant to accept this. Why would it? Context is everything. What Putin didn't say, our last one on that bit before you come back to me on it. What Putin didn't say is, we in Britain, in the Second World War, lost 450,000 combatants and civilians. So for the bombings you spoke about, the London Blitz, etc., and all of the battles that the British military took part in, by the way, in that figure you have to include the British Empire troops from Africa, the Caribbean, and from the Far East, Hong Kong and places like that. Right. What isn't included in that is other parts of the British Empire, bigger ones. So it doesn't include South African forces. It doesn't include New Zealand forces, Australian forces, Canadian forces. The battle dead were put by themselves. But again, with those battle dead, of those elements, so New Zealand, 11,000 people, example. Right. So you're not talking masses of people. But when you put the others together, like my father who ploughed the seas, didn't die, thank God, ploughed the seas to bring goods to Britain during the Battle of the Atlantic from 1939, 1940 onwards until the end of the war, when ships were being sunk left, right and centre. If he'd have died, they would have been the casualties. They were part of British casualties. They were shown as British, of course. Right? Because Britain never stood alone. Britain stood with its empire, right? People have always felt, we stood alone. No, you stood with British Empire, right? Not just Britain, which is a third of the world, right? And a third of the world's population. A third of the world's landmass and a third of the world's population. We need to understand that, right? So, 450,000 British and Commonwealth people died, not including, obviously, the Indians, etc., right? Indians, by the way, lost 3 million if you include those who had died through starvation, because the food was being sent to Britain. So what you notice there is that's our losses. The United States lost around about the same, 450,000, 460,000, fighting on the two fronts it fought on. The Soviet Union lost a minimum, not maximum, of 27 million. Right? So when Putin's thinking, he's thinking to himself, we lost 27 million people in a conflict. No way am I allowing us to be surrounded again. This is context. This is context. We talk about the Second World War and say, we got to look after ourselves. Hitler did that. 450,000 against 27 million minimum. And some have put it as high as 42 million people dead. Right? You've got to put this in context.
Staggering amount of people.
Staggering amount of people. So this guy's saying, not only will I not allow it, the Russian people will not allow it. Because they're going to turn around and say, hey, we don't want to ever get caught out like that again. Where everybody's got somebody who's dead. Right? So that's the context. And that's also the context to the nuclear weaponry of Russia. And also to the context of why they're not bluffing. And also to the context of why it's ultra dangerous what we are doing.
So if you were... Okay, I'm going to start with this. So if you were Zelensky, before this conflict has started, what would you have done?
Okay. Zelensky, by the way, is a Russian speaker. He was not a Ukrainian speaker, and people say he's Ukrainian, he's not that good.
Right,
okay. Let me give you some background. I was in the Ukraine in 2011. Okay? Last time I was there, 2011. And I was speaking to some Ukrainians in government, because I was a foreign secretary. I brought the foreign secretary over. Before that, I was speaking to the Ukrainian people around there. One of the guys I was speaking to, basically, is effectively a Brit, brought up here, etc., etc. When that Soviet Union fell in 1991-92, what happened is a lot of people from a lot of different countries who'd been living outside of the Soviet Union went back to the countries of their fathers. Right? And these people, because they're educated in Western ways, etc., got good positions. Now, in terms of the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians were a people that were part of the Soviet Union, but part of it had previously been part of Poland, these are more Catholic people rather than Russian Orthodox people. What happened is, when the German war machine came through in Operation Barbarossa, Fall Weiß, Case White, Operation Barbarossa, which is the attack on the Soviet Union, when they came through, some of these Ukrainians, under people like Stefan Bandera, they decided we fight with the Germans, and basically became part of the German SS, because foreign troops who fought for the Germans were generally SS soldiers. Right? So they became part of the SS, the Schutzstaffel. And the SS was tasked with operations in occupied lands, which were going to be part of the Reich, and getting rid of partisans. So basically, they went around exterminating people, right? So these are the people who rounded up a whole host of folk, put them in ditches, machine gunned them, etc., went home for a cup of tea, came back, machine gunned a couple more, before they started getting the gas chambers all sorted out and doing it. These were regular Russian people, Jewish Russians, Zelensky, example, Jewish Russian, and Polish people who were not orientated to the Polish aspect of their independence, right? So were more saw them as a Soviet Polish, so it could be communists or whatever. So generally communists, which the Germans hated, right? So these guys were exterminated, and gals, and children, and babies, right? Exterminated them. Now, so this is the point. This is what you've got to see this. So at the end of the Second World War, okay, the Cossacks, who'd also fought on the side of the German, but not to that extent, were allowed back to the Soviet Union, okay? And Stalin was going to top most of them, kill a lot of them. Not all of them, but he exported a lot of them to Siberia, etc., right? These others, these basically Nazi bandierists, they said, we know how the system functions, to the American and to the British forces, to intelligence agencies, okay? Then it was the OSS and still SIS, MI6. We know how they function. You will have to fight these Soviets. We can aid you. So what happened is they took these guys and put them in Canada, Britain, United States. The children and grandchildren are the ones who went back to the Ukraine with that mentality.
Right, I see.
So when I was there speaking to some of these guys and gals, they were saying then, 2011, mark the one time I'm saying, the last time I was there, they were saying, we are going to stop all these people speaking Russian. Because the eastern part of the Ukraine, all Russian speaking. Crimea, 99% Russian.
Yeah.
Right? All Russian speakers, right? We're going to stop these people speaking Russian, and if they don't stop, we're not going to pay them a pension, we're not going to have them in their Russian schools, we're going to close down the Russian Orthodox churches, we're going to do all this, because it should be Catholics like us, etc., etc. Right. I said, you're going to cause a war. You're going to do what Idi Amin Dada did in Uganda, and the people are going to come out of the country. He said, great. They leave. But we're not having this. So this is your mentality from some people. By no means all people.
Yeah.
Because, of course, it's never all people. But it's by some people. The people who feel for it are the ones that make things happen.
Yeah.
So these are the people who wanted to make things happen. And these were in government. Okay? So what you had was that mentality. And that's what they started doing. So it then pushed a lot of people who were Russians to say, Putin, look after us. We want you to look after us. They're going to try and exterminate us, because then they started taking actions against them, etc., etc. So Putin's little green men went in there. He said they were nothing to do with Russia. He said they were just volunteers who wanted to go in there. But there's probably Russian special forces, Spetsnaz, etc., who went in trying to stop this. And there was a war going on from 2012 to do this and that. The American, who were pushing this forward anyway, then carried out the coup against, Maidan coup in 2012, 2014, against the sitting president, who was not really pro-Russian. Actually, what he was, let's keep a single line between the two. Yeah? Not EU, not American, not Russian. Let's try and play them both off, but let's try and live with them. Yeah? Mm-hmm. No. They wanted rid of him. Got him out. US coup. Everybody knows it. It's clear it was done. Nuland has said that was the case. She even was there choosing who would be in charge. She even said, Klitschko cannot be in charge. Right? We don't like him. We'll put somebody else in power. Like, telling you it's Americans set it all up. Right? Okay. So it's done. My damn coup.
The Americans again.
So this is what they do, because they want to still be the world leader of the world, as we spoke about last week. So therefore, I'm not talking out of school. I'm dealing with things that are there, that are known.
Yeah.
So therefore, what happened is that by the time we get now to 2020, basically, it's been made clear. Now, Bill Byrne, I'd better put this in as well, who is now the head of the CIA, he was the ambassador to Russia.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Now, he had written back a report to the United States saying, do not try and bring Ukraine into NATO. Niet is niet. No is no. It's not just Putin. The whole Russian system will not allow this.
Yeah.
It will mean war. He wrote that. It's a cable wrote. We know it because it was put up on WikiLeaks.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Right, so that's how we know it openly.
Yeah.
So it's known openly. WikiLeaks put that cable out. Right, it's done. Don't do it. Right, this guy's now the head of the CIA and he's now saying something different. But at the time, he was the ambassador. So he understands what's going on. That's his job, to figure out what's going on there. And he says this will be a big problem. So they do it, and they try and turn them, and they do what they do, and it happens. The CIA bring the coup in, and they got 12 bases in there, and all the rest of it, secret bases in Ukraine, and action's taken care of. So by 2020, then, and 2022, basically they say, you're going too far. You're now trying to destabilise everything. But do not do this. Okay? They don't listen. Won't do negotiations. Because there was a negotiation, but Angela Merkel, whom I thought was superb, came out and said, we only carried out the Minsk agreement, which is agreement Russia, Germany, France. The Minsk agreement, we only did it so we could have time to keep training Ukrainians. Right? They were being trained all over the place. I'm not saying anything secret now. They were trained in Britain, they were trained in Germany, they were trained all over the place. Okay? So this were trained and bringing them back. They had a 350,000 man army. Strong army, powerful army, right? Powerful army. Trained with modern weaponry, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so that's what they did. Right? So what happened then, and this is where the problems all lie, what happened then is that they played Putin. Putin said, special military project. And the reason why it is a special military project, right? He put 115,000 men on the front to carry his special military project. Right? He knows they've got a 350,000 man army. So you're only putting 115,000 man army, you know you're in a deficit.
Yeah.
So he put it out and he rolled out. What he didn't do is, for those of you who don't know, I was in Afghanistan, I was in Iraq. What they didn't do was, in Iraq, what we did is 14 days, bombings, boom, 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 blowing stuff up.
Yeah.
Blowing up communications, blowing this, blowing that, blowing them, whatever. He never did any of that. No shock and awe, they called it, because the explosion's going on. No shock and awe. Because he saw them, and I said it on this programme. I said it, go back to is Putin mad, bad, or, I call it, is Putin mad, bad, or, I forget the last bit I said. Anyway, you can look it up, it's on one of my podcasts. But what I did do is I explained this, that he didn't do any shock and awe. What he just wanted to do was to show the Ukrainian that he's serious.
No, he was serious, yeah.
Right?
You need to back down.
So he goes in, back down, And they went in and they rolled as far as Kiev. You might remember this in 2022. They were as far as Kiev. All of a sudden then, they withdrew. And they were saying, massive strategic actions by Ukraine. No, there was another set of talks. And that set of talks was in Ankara, in Turkey, Turkish capital. And they were talking, and that came to fruition. And Zelensky and his comrades then, they said, right, we can deal with this. And basically what Putin said is, we keep Crimea, because they'd taken that already in 2014. We'll keep that, because it's Russian. Right? But we will not take the border country areas. We won't take them. They want us to, but we won't. Right? But you have to be neutral. Now, people say, why must they be neutral? Neutral, terrible. Well, hang on. Ireland's neutral. Austria's neutral. Two of the wealthiest parts of Europe, neutral.
Yeah.
They're neutral. Those are two of the wealthiest parts of Europe. Right? Neutral. So what we're saying, you must be neutral. Okay? Great. That's what it was. And fill your boots. He wasn't even saying, don't join the European Union. He's saying, don't join NATO.
Yeah.
The military alliance. Neutral. right? Boom. Neutral.
So if you're Zelensky at this point...
So Zelensky then
What do you do?
agrees to sign. He agrees to sign. He indeed signs, apparently. And you know who said that? The Prime Minister, ex-Prime Minister to Israel, who was at the thing, it was part of the negotiations.
Right, okay.
He said it was signed. The Turks said it was signed. Putin showed it to the African delegates last year before. Showed the signed document. It's signed. We're not going to go. That's it. Finished. No more war. And to show goodwill, what Putin did is withdrew his military back from Kiev. That's why they left. We now understand because the Ukrainian general in charge has said that's why they withdrew. So it's not as though it hadn't happened. They're not telling you this in the West, but that's what the Ukrainian general said.
Yeah, this feeds back to what we were discussing last week, and not being told what we're supposed to be told.
The Ukrainian general said, "We are withdrawing. We've done it. We're withdrawing." Right? Boom. Everybody's happy. We'll withdraw to the lines. What happens? Do you know what happened? A certain buffoon turned up. Right?
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
right. A certain buffoon turned up. Right.
Yeah.
Armed with the direction. We come back to Poodle. Mm-hmm. Armed with the direction of the United States. Right? And said, do not sign that. Right? Do not. He said, well, sign. But do not agree to it. Carry on. We will give you everything you need.
Yeah.
And we will cajole, and obviously he's playing the. Well, we will cajole everything you need. Right?
Yeah.
Right? So Johnson turns up there and tells them not to do it. Right? At that stage, something like 2,000 people have been killed.
Yep.
Now, 500,000 Ukrainian young men later, dead, and something like, apparently they say about 700,000 maimed. Right? So his actions have real consequence.
But then also Zelensky's actions as well.
Right.
He didn't have to go along with this. And also...
Well, this is where the question is. Now, I'm not so sure what Zelensky was. I wonder if Zelensky was what we call an agent.
Okay.
If we hadn't controlled him.
Okay.
Because otherwise, why Johnson the man that's gone? If it was an American who controlled him, well, why wouldn't an American send, American Under Secretary Newland or whatever, send her over? But Johnson's gone. Now, I know Johnson wanted to be somebody because, you see, this is how all the world comes. This is why.
This is it as well. And it's a couple of people making these decisions. And like you just say, Johnson's gone in there. Zelensky. So it's two people here have made the decisions that ended up killing 500,000 people.
Correct.
It's disgusting.
This is why.
It's
But this is the bigger point. This is why I do the show, Geopolitics. This is why I do the show. Now listen to this step. Listen to this step. Johnson, yes, does that because the Americans want him to. But, and this is the but, it's never only one thing. That's what I say on this show, ladies and gentlemen. It's never only one thing. Johnson, when he does it, wants to prove that Brexit doesn't destroy Britain. That Brexit still has Britain as a number one position. So he goes over there, right, says what he says, stands in front and says, Britain is still very important to the world. We've gone out and we've done this. We are saying that we will keep you, and we are saying we will make you defeat the country. We are giving you this. Don't talk about what American will do, which is going to put up all the money, basically. But he says, this is what we're going to do. We are the people who will serve, control and aid you. Right? So he goes over and gives all this big business. So we look as though, and then people turn around and say, we said Britain was nothing, but look, Boris Johnson's the only one in Europe doing it. He's most powerful. Right? That's what... See, so that's Brexit you had to do. Now, also look the next step. The next step, you always got to look at the steps. And the biggest step I always say on this show is follow the money.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So when people go to war, the first thing they need are armaments.
And that all comes from America.
It all comes
Ourselves.
with the money rolling.
The money,
right?
yeah.
Because what happens then is, even if you give your old Challenger tanks or your old M1 Abrams tanks, or if the Germans Leopard tanks, or you give them body armour, or you give them this, you give them that, you give them t'other, what then happens is they say, we've got to replenish our coffers.
Yeah.
We've got to replenish our weapons. And it's quite interesting that they...
And then you've got the whole rebuild of the cities afterwards
Correct.
as well. Contracts
Correct.
for that, which is already being agreed, by the way. Yeah.
General Accounting Office of the United States, right? And you see here, I've got an Excellence Award from the General Accounting Office for fraud, waste and abuse on the presidential programme for my actions which I did for the American when I used to work for them. Right, okay. So the General Accounting Office looks at things like that and looks at where fraud is, where waste, abuse is, all that sort of stuff. Right? So, what happened is, the General Accounting Office says, why is it that we give them, at the time I think it was something like 20 billion worth of armaments, but you've put in here 60 billion for them to be replaced? Mm-hmm. Right, see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So 20 billion's gone out, but to replace them, we need to put 60 billion.
Yeah.
And then your man, who is the Defence Secretary of the United States and used to work for Raytheon, one of the largest armaments companies going, he says, well, because, we need to upgrade our capacity. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, the upgrading of the capacity then will mean in time, mark my words, it won't be 60 billion. It'll be 80, 90 billion. Because they'll turn around and say, oh, well, the Russians were effective in knocking that out, so we needed to build that one. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Everybody's making money.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is what it all comes down to at the end of the day, isn't it? It's all about money. It's not about anything else. And let's be real. It's about filling their pockets.
And in doing that, Joe Soap, everyday person, is getting killed.
Exactly. It's disgusting. It's terrible.
It's getting killed.
It's terrible.
Right.
And I also think, that we need to do a podcast, to be honest, on the media, to be honest, because at the end of the day, a journalist's job is to go seek the truth, and they're not doing that. And if they were seeking the truth and all this information was coming out, which it should be, then it wouldn't happen.
Well, it's quite interesting because, as you know, my podcast wife, Fergus, is on. I keep saying to her, we need to do a programme on the media. She said, oh, yes. yeah, we'll be doing on media. Right, because, of course, she was a journalist.
Yeah.
And is effectively still a journalist, albeit that she's working in the area of stars and promoting their stardom, which is great, no problem. But I always say to her, how could the head of the biggest paper in the United Kingdom get away with saying, I did not know where the stories were coming from about the royal family? Right, so if you're the editor of a newspaper and stories are coming in about the royals, big stories, which is now you see them in court on it, big stories coming in on the royals, big stories coming in on A-list actors, big stories.
Facts checked.
Right, exactly.
But where's that
Facts checked,
Yeah.
lawyers, etc., right? You don't just say, or print.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
no.
You have to get you have to.
So you
check
say
it
to the guy, where did that story come from? And he says, we were bugging the phones. Clearly that's what's been said.
Yeah.
But she stands up and says, I'm the number one in the country. Rebecca Brooks this is. I'm the number one in the country, and I didn't know anything about it. Surely somebody should say, well, hang on, you didn't do your job then, did you?
Yeah, you should be sacked.
No.
Sorry, any other
No,
job, you could do that at McDonald's, you'd be sacked if you didn't know it was in
What
the
happens
chips.
is they say, oh, right, we can't prove anything in court, we walk away free of charge. Walk away free. This is the problem, my friend.
Yeah.
This is the problem. You rightly say, if somebody's working in a chippy and they don't look at what's in your
chips, yeah, they
they
just-
say, hang on, what's that? You don't know about what's going in your chips?
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
happening? It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
So this is the problem. Right? So I keep saying to Fergus, we must talk about this. Yeah, we will.
Yeah, well, we need
So we're going to get Fergs on here.
Yeah,
We're going to
yeah,
get
yeah.
Fergs on it. I'm going to put you on with Fergs as well.
Yeah.
And we're going to put some hit on that. And we're going to look at the media. So, yeah. This is where the problem... Because I think it's now critical. I think it's now undermining the country.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
I've given you a feel as to where I sit on that Ukrainian war. And by the way, one other thing I will say. When I was in the Ukraine, absolutely corrupt. Mm-hmm. And I mean absolutely corrupt.
Yeah.
So we've been in, seen the president, come back off, doing a record to get the president, come back off, and I was with one of the chiefs of the police, security police, so top police, security police, and we're driving, and I then saw this convoy driving through the street, 90 miles an hour. Convoy, about 15 cars. You know, like American, but American have 70 cars, whatever, but 15 cars. Boom, 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 going through the street, red lights, boom, boom, blue lights. I said, well, they're leaving quickly, aren't they, from, me? Oh, no, that's not presidential, that's not government. I said, well, who the hell is that? He said, oh, that's the top mafia guy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Police siren, blah, 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 knocking about. Top mafia guy.
Mm.
He went like, shamed you, what he said. He said, that's a top mafia guy. He said, under his top, he says, he's a oligarch. That's a flipping heck. Right? So this is a guy, oligarch, driving around, police escort, bum, bum, bum. He apparently backed Zelensky.
Right, okay.
Right? So this is what you're dealing with.
Mm.
You're dealing with this at that corrupt level. Not that long into the war, a friend of mine, Indian fella, good connection with Indian services. He comes to me and he says, have you heard? I said, what have I heard? He says, a plane crashed in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I said, all right, okay, fair enough. So what? Type of thing. He said, they're full of arms. I said, what? He said, arms from Ukraine, all sold to Bangladeshis. So the arms coming in from the West, straight onto a plane, bang, off to Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Right? Money.
It's all corruption.
All being made.
All money, yeah.
All being made. Next thing I'm hearing from people now, Americans, is these arms, javelin missiles, right, that can take down a bloody helicopter, are in the hands of Mexican cartels.
Yeah.
Sold on from Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And apparently they're saying, I don't know this, so I don't want to say, but some people are suggesting that there's a big bazaar in parts of the former Yugoslavia. I'm not going to name the country because I don't know precisely, and I don't say things I don't know precisely. But, so that Dakar crash was never put on any news.
Yep.
Never put in any news. Mm-hmm. Never spoken about. And there's very few people saying anything about weapons going into the hands of major drug cartels.
I've heard it a few times, but it's on stuff like Joe Rogan's podcast. It's not in the mainstream media. There you go. This is the thing.
This is where
and I'm sorry, but it takes away our liberty as people. Because we're just not being told the truth, and then we're being told or forced stuff. And also, that brings us on to the next subject.
Please.
So you're being told lies constantly and fed into this, yet then you're told, right, you need to take this vaccine for this this COVID thing. And I'm sure now you must have seen reports of people coming out with all sorts of adverse effects. It's definitely hitting people now. There's bodies being there's what they call them, big what's the word I'm looking for?
Corporations?
No.
Oh, right,
no, I'm talking about within the body.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
So they're putting out, big white blood clots from people's veins and arteries on their deathbed. It's happening now at like 20% of bodies.
No.
100%.
I need to look. Tell me more, because I need to look into this. I'm not. And of course, Dr. Rachel is another one of whom I have on the show. You need to come on with Dr. Rachel and Fergus, and we'll hit on.
I've done a lot of research into this, into the COVID vaccine, and yeah, there's a lot of worrying stories coming out. A lot of stuff. In fact, excess deaths, as you know, that was reported on, I think maybe once or twice in the mainstream media, saying about excess deaths are going through the roof. Yeah. They've now changed the way that they count excess deaths, so that's all changed. So government has just changed the statistics or the way that they count these excess deaths so that they come down on the reports. And like I say, there's I watch a doctor called Dr. John Campbell.
Okay. What's the credential of him?
He is a medical doctor. I think he's a nurse, actually. He's been teaching for a number of years at various universities and hospitals.
American, British
doctor. And he was very, very pro-vaccine right at the beginning of all of this. And he just follows the evidence, essentially. Right. And that's what he's been doing. And now he is on the complete opposite side. He's disgusted, essentially, that he has had to, or he was forced to have this vaccine, and he was told on numerous occasions, this vaccine is safe, this vaccine is safe, this vaccine is safe. And then it turns out that there's people dropping dead on football pitches, we're seeing it. Various things that we weren't told about and various lies being told. But he has had a number recently, over the last few weeks, months, he's had a number of morticians who have come into his show. And they are discussing what they are seeing. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this, what they are seeing is that a number of the bodies that are being received, and this only started happening after 2021, after the release of the vaccine, a number of these bodies are showing a completely new pathology, which are clots, which are like white rubbery clots that are being pulled out of people's arterial system and their venous systems. Some of them 2 feet long, the length of people's legs. And yeah, I think he's had about 100, 200 morticians across the country and across the US, across various countries, who have sent him evidence of this. They've sent him, what am I looking for? What's the word?
Autopsies?
They sent him copy. Yeah, they've sent him pieces of evidence. They've come onto the show. They're detailing everything that they've seen, and we're not seeing any of this within the mainstream media. You're hearing about it a couple of times being spoken in Parliament, but then it just gets laughed off. People get heckled, and they just get ignored.
So who said it in Parliament?
I can't remember. What's the guy called?
Conservative, Labour?
I'll tell you his name in a moment.
So let me ask you 2 questions on that. You're saying that the vaccine wasn't properly tried and tested, which I agree with. Which I agree with. You're saying that, but my argument had always been that something needs to be done to stop the deaths that were mounting up. Now, I accepted that for an older person, the gamble was much less critical than for a younger person, because, I'm not going to say, thalidomide example, 20 years later you find out it's causing a problem. Factor VIII in blood example, you find out that, in fact, that's a massive scandal. In fact, the Scottish Health Service would not buy Factor VIII blood from the United States. Mm-hmm. Like the Scottish NHS said, we're not buying it. The Welsh were considering it. We in England bought Factor VIII several years after the Scots, and then some few years after the Welsh would buy it. And we lost 30,000 people dead, right? Because they were all getting AIDS, etc. Right? So the question is, we do know, and the reason for it was cheap.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we do know that mistakes can be made. So I'm not questioning you about that. We know that. When I spoke to Dr. Rachel, because I've had something on with Dr. Rachel about this, she said the one thing that bothered her, and she never took any vaccine, was the fact that they were playing around with the vaccine at the genetic level.
Yeah.
Now, that's not problematic if it's tailored to the individual.
Exactly. And
the problem was it's not tailored to the individual. Everybody's getting the same thing.
Correct.
So that was her perspective. But we want to listen to her and let her speak for herself on it.
Yeah.
At some stage. So is that your position as well?
Yeah, that is right. I mean, they've found now that the vaccine is causing foreign DNA inside it. I mean, it just wasn't tested. And then we're hearing constant lies in government saying it's 100% tested, it's safe, there is no harm being done to people about this vaccine. MP was Andrew Bridgen, by the way.
Oh, Bridgen. I know him.
Bridgen, yeah.
I know
Andrew Bridgen. He was the one who...
So he's brought it forward.
He's been raising all this in Parliament, yeah. He's been raising all this in Parliament. He actually got expelled by the Tory party, I think, a year ago when he first mentioned it.
Right, okay.
But yeah, he's now been raising this in Parliament, but he's getting laughed at. But it is getting to a point now where a lot more people are coming forward who are affected by this as well. But I just think it's very worrying. I think it's very worrying that it's something that's forced on every single person, yet when it goes wrong, they don't want to hold their hands up and admit that maybe we did make an error. It's just... Yeah. It just shows complete
I'm not discounting you, and I think we need to give this subject the gravitas that it should have by putting it together with the four of us, and let's hit the subject. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will hit this subject. We will hit the COVID-19 subject with a doctor, with a journalist, with myself as an intelligence person, and a person who's a man about town who works in the field of fiscal activity, because he knows about the money. So look at that. Now, the reason why I say that is because the next thing which on that issue which you can look at, you do know, and we'll save it for the programme, you do know that Fauci...
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say, yeah? That he put the work out to China to do it in the first place.
Of course,
so the American was doing the work in China, not the Chinese doing it. They said we couldn't do it in America, so we outsourced it to Wuhan. To Wuhan. So this is now becoming crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So you get the President of the United States saying it's from China, when it's the US Health Service that pushed it out to China to get it done. They couldn't write it. So, anyway, if you didn't know that, ladies and gentlemen, you're now hearing it here. We will look at that subject. So, we said nuclear. So the bit I want to finish on nuclear, because we didn't finish, is this is why it's dangerous on the nuclear aspect. Because, of course, if you push Russia and Russia's going to lose, it will defend itself with nuclear.
It will.
Or the other danger is NATO losing will try and use a tactical nuclear weapon, and that will then cause them to come back with strategic nuclear weapons. Russia.
Just quickly on that then, what happens if it does come down to a nuclear war?
It's all over.
Everyone just dead.
It's all... If you listen to Scott Ritter... Now, I know people like to do Scott Ritter down, because Scott Ritter, by the way, if you're not familiar with Scott Ritter, and I'm going to get him on the show one day, Scott Ritter is the guy who was tasked with finding the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq for the United States and for the UN. For the UN. That was his job.
So is he the guy who went there and came and said, look, there's no weapons?
He was an intelligence officer. He went out to look for it. Not saying there wasn't any before. He's a Marines intelligence officer, US Marine intelligence officer. Went out and did it. Now, Scott Ritter resigned his post on the back of that because the CIA told him, Scott, you've not got the message.
Am I right in saying as well that there was there's a British person who went over there the same as well and came back, but then he was found dead? Different.
That's a different thing. That's okay. On a super gun. But I know who you're talking about. No, this is Scott Ritter. So he important guy, is very familiar with nuclear armaments, because he was also the one of the fellows with the first nuclear arms thing in Russia, right? And they had nuclear arms agreements. If you listen to Scott, you will find out that he is, like me, fearful of nuclear war. Yeah. Because...
once it starts, where's it stop?
Well, it can't. This is the problem. Because what youngsters don't understand is, and who weren't in the game, when I say the game, I'm talking about the intelligence, national security game, military even, to some extent, less so military, but in the game. You know, a nuclear submarine captain would understand the example. There was a time when 24-hour notice, pilots in the RAF sat in their aircraft with nuclear weapons attached to their aircraft, ready to take off at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
Okay? Day in, day out. Right? There was a time when every nuclear submarine commander had his weapons targeted at the Soviet Union and China, ready to roll. And vice versa. There was a time in Germany called it Mittelstreckenraketen, middle distance rockets, the NATO Doppelbeschluss, which was an agreement with NATO about where the weapons would go on each side, right, were within literally 7 minutes, Europe is finished.
Yeah.
Right? Because the weapons were pointing at each other like that. Okay? One from one side, one to the other. Bang, gone. Finished. And the problem was, with this nuclear situation, was that there was no time to stop it. So every morning we woke up was lucky.
Yeah.
Right? We then got past that after the end of it, and we made agreements, etc., etc., etc. You know, we'd get rid of these amount of weapons, we wouldn't do them, we wouldn't have short distance weapons, etc. This is what we've now gone back to, because the American said we don't need to listen to Russians anymore because they're weak. That's a fact. This is Scott Ritter saying, it's not me.
Yeah.
He's a proud, patriotic American, and he's telling you, the American said, why listen to the Russian? We don't need them. They're weak. Right? So we're back now to a situation where Russia is no longer weak. Chinese are obviously got to protect himself from the American. And we're at a situation whereby this can happen again. It may actually happen in Palestine, because if Israel thinks it's going to be overrun, it too would declare its nuclear weapons and let them go. Right? So where this ends, you don't know. So we're at a very dangerous time in the world where nuclear war is no longer something that we cannot think about. It's back to the old days where we were thinking about it. When I was a kid, I can remember 1960 as a kid, I can remember going to school and a siren used to go off, and we always started going to our desks. Right? We always just go under the desk. Right. So that's where we are. We're back to that. We're not putting the siren on, but we're back to the perspective where you've got subs under the ground, but you can't find them, they're about, and who knows where they're targeted to. Because if it takes, it takes.
It's a dirty world.
It's very, very dangerous. So that's where we were. I mean, I think what we'll do, we'll look at gender another time.
Yeah.
I know you want to speak on that issue because I'm sure you're interested in the Tate aspect, and you're interested in, as you said, how, why is Tate there? And I think it's bigger than Tate. I think the gender issue is not just Tate. I think it's Trump, and I think it's Johnson, and I think it's people like that. Because what it is men feeling themselves overwhelmed. And I think that they're listening to potentially false prophets who are saying, this is where we can go. So that will be another day.
We'll save that for another
You
day.
come back down the man on that, will you?
I will indeed, yeah, definitely.
So, Dan, any last thoughts?
No. Very nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me back. And yeah, I look forward to coming on again, having discussions on various subjects. Obviously, if you're going to get on Fergus, that would be great. And yeah, we can pick up where we left off.
Brilliant. I'm going to get you, Fergus, Dr. Rachel. We're going to look at this whole issue of vaccine. This has to be spoken about.
Yeah.
If other people aren't speaking about it, then we'll speak about it. I'm ignorant of it. I'm going to put me, I'm ignorant of that aspect of it, so I want to learn more on that aspect of it. You seem to be up to date on that aspect of it.
I'll do a deep dive and I'll come back with some more details for next time I'm on.
Super. We'll get Doc Rachel on as well, and Fergus on from the media side, and we're gonna hammer out this vaccine. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening. It's been a two-parter of the utmost interest. Dan the man around town, bop, in his cab. Yeah. I'm sure that you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Take care all. Bye-bye.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy Podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
For a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.